Okay, good day, Dragon Slayers. It's Dr. Tom Bittker, joined by my rabbi friend and attorney, Michael Dallen, to discuss current events and how they may intersect with our Bible and religious beliefs. Well, this has been a painful week. We've seen insurrections in our streets, presumed overreach by ICE, and I would say the gradual crumbling of President Trump's mandate, which is going to have a fair amount of challenging downstream consequences for our country. Michael, I would welcome your perspective. We talked off camera about this, but I know you have some very strong feelings, as do I, about the taint on society as a consequence of presumed ICE overreach. What is your perspective?
Well, I put up on Facebook a line that I stole from Saturday Night Live, where you have the execrable Tom Homan, who was caught with carrying a bag of $50,000 of bribes, who was the architect of this program to separate immigrant children from their parents. I call him execrable. That might be an insult to execrable people, but there he is. He's the new face of ICE in Minnesota, and he's taking questions from his troops. And one asks, ICE is asking in Minneapolis, why does all the fast food in the city taste like spit? And this has been a very popular post for me. And I had to explain to an old friend that you have to understand that the liberty-loving fast food workers of Minneapolis have been specially curating the packages of food that they give to their ICE customers.
So,
I'm proud of our citizenry. I'm proud of the people of Minneapolis, all these Lutheran people and descended from Lutheran Scandinavian immigrants, and there they are. Um, they're very communitarian, and they're out there in their freezing cold in their masses demonstrating against ICE because they're appalled because we saw these really nice people were murdered by ICE.
you mentioned something earlier that intrigued me. You implied that Holman was a bagman.
Homan, yes. Yeah, he was caught by the FBI with a $50,000 bribe in a bag,
When did this
50,000 in cash. He was pardoned not terribly long ago, but I think it was in the first Trump term.
Good Lord. Okay.
Well, Trump has a lot of, you know, low lives. But look, the playing field is extremely dynamic, and we have what Trump calls an armada just outside the borders of Iran, and they're armed to the teeth, and you know, they're quite likely to be ordered into combat, and that's going to erase many of our memories of these current things. Like, we have if it's not one thing, it's another. But when there is bad stuff happening for Trump, he'll come up with something new. We suddenly killed 24 Cuban security people around Maduro and lifted him out of Venezuela, contrary to many laws and UN treaties and public accords. And he's sitting in Brooklyn now in a horrible federal lockup. I don't feel great sympathy for Maduro, but he's a human being, and we're bound by law. And there was probably a crime called perfidy, a military law classification of not using unmarked or civilian marked weapons of war, not coming into combat with a lack of uniforms. We're supposed to identify ourselves in combat. And it looks very clear that the crime of perfidy was committed by our forces, by our Navy, to wipe out, they called them narco traffickers, but we weren't at war, but it was a technique that can't legally be used or morally used, even in war. So we've got a lot going on in a day, possibly. we're not going to be talking about Minneapolis at all or ICE. We're going to be talking about the new use of U.S. arms in Iran, and which I would remind you, Trump promised the people of Iran that he would have their backs. He said, "We'll have your backs if you demonstrate, if you rise up against the regime."
He's a bit
Th-
late.
Well, they did, and they were crushed.
Right, because Trump didn't come to their aid in time.
He didn't have their backs. Nobody had their backs. The regime just rose up and wiped them out. We don't know if it was 5,500 people or 12,000 or more who were killed, or many were blinded by buckshot. You know, I've heard stories of these ophthalmologists in Tehran cleaning people's eye sockets out.
Oh, God.
Yeah, just unbelievably horrible stuff. I don't know if they actually relied on Trump, but he tried to get them to rely on him, and they did try to rise up against that vile regime, that horrible Jew-hating regime, and they were crushed.
Well, it doesn't appear that Trump's commitments hold much credibility.
But he's the leader of the United States.
But what is that gonna mean several
W
years down the road when
Well, I
America.
don't know. He's diminishing the brand. You went to Davos, and he spoke like a nut. He gave his usual kind of speech. He was speaking here to the Economic Club of Detroit, and people were aghast because they weren't used to hearing his usual rally-type speech, but he gives the same speech all the time, and it's all about how the 2020 election was fraudulent, that he was screwed out of the presidency then, the same stuff that he tried to generate in the January 6th rioters, how he's the greatest guy, how wonderful he is, and how he's a natural genius. He was talking at Davos about how these other NATO countries that had come to our assistance after 9/11 really hadn't done much. You know, it was very disappointing of them. And they sent in their best, their brightest, and sacrificed their own people, and he's diminishing their contributions, their sacrifice. And you know that Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, was speaking out quite eloquently, and he was saying, "This is a rupture. This is not a transition. This is a rupture in our relations with the United States. Even if we get rid of Trump in 3 years or so, the chances are that we might come up with another Trump. The good peoples of the world can't safely operate in the old ways with the United States. It's not at all trustworthy. That might be helmed by another jerk, another demagogue, another authoritarian like Trump. He tried to take Greenland from our allies, our devoted allies, the Danes, and for no particular reason. I mean, um, and we have a constituency in the States that is, just about 40% of us back him to the hilt. I can't understand it, but, if you have 10 Americans, at least 3 or 4 are solidly pro-Trump. They will support him in all things. That's our country. We're getting the kind of government that we deserve, God help us.
The polls are indicating that that's no longer the case.
I hope.
No, there
I
is
hope.
a rather conspicuous leakage, certainly of the middle ground. A lot of people are showing skepticism, indeed remorse about supporting him.
I've said this before, from your mouth to God's ears. I
Well,
hope. But let me remind you that we, the Allies, pulled the Germans after World War II in 1946, a full year after the war, and the German people were still 40% for Hitler and for the Nazis. 40% seems to be a threshold uh, of authoritarian support. Um, when you have 40% of a country, you have a lot. So I hope he has less than 50%, but if he has 40%, we're very divided. And,
well,
and
let's look down the road. What is the likelihood that the Republicans are gonna be prevailing in the midterms. I think that's growing increasingly unlikely.
I
They're
s
gonna lose the House, and we may well lose the Senate.
Please, God, this is
Okay.
the time to pray, okay? Bring out all your faithfulness, and if you want some good prayers, that can help you with, I'm glad to, I'll photocopy them and I'll photograph them and I'll send them down to you, and we can all pray together. I hope. Let's hope.
Well, the other thing that is fracturing, uh, the Republican Party is your old animus anti-Semitism. They can't decide where they stand on that if you listen to some of the stuff like Tucker Carlson and so on.
Well, yeah, and these right-wing guys are very, very awful. Like Greg Bovino, the head of the ICE operation um, in in Minneapolis. Imagine him having a hard time with, an Orthodox Jewish lawyer, a man of law challenging his rights. It didn't work well with him. I don't know, it's funny. I've got a friend right now who's down in Panama City. It's a good time to take a vacation. We're suffering from, Arctic air here in Detroit. So he and his family are down in Panama, and we were talking about Panama, and you've gotta remember that everything south of the border has been subject to the Spanish or Portuguese Inquisition. For more than 500 years, for more than 5 centuries, they maintain an active, intensive purge of their society, of every Jew, every bit of Judaizing, they call it, which often meant Protestantism. Even reading of the Bible was proscribed as too Jewish. They did their best to eradicate any Jewish influence from these countries, and the people of these countries bear the marks of that. They didn't go through a reformation. They were subject to the Inquisition instead. I remember I was traveling down to a relative's wedding, and I was with a Mexican engineer, Detroit Mexican engineer, on the way, and he's on his way to Mexico City, and we stop in Dallas, where my terminus, and he's going on about how how why it was that Texas wanted to secede from Mexico, and yeah, to have slavery because Mexican civilization had outlawed slavery. They had peonage, which was another thing entirely, but that they had outlawed, chattel slavery. And I said, "Yeah, but you know where you're going? You're going down to the land of the Inquisition and the auto da fe, the act of faith, where they burn heretics, which it meant as much as possible. Usually it meant Jews. Sometimes it meant Moors, Arabs, Muslims, Protestants sometimes. But that land has been perverted, and those people have pathologies. And then when you look at ICE, you realize, lo and behold, more than half of the ICE personnel, the new recruits that have been coming in with these $50,000 um, bonuses and student loan forgiveness packages for their contracts are from South Texas. They're Hispanics from South Texas. These are the heirs, the children of the Inquisition, and these are not great friends of the Jewish people mostly. I mean, there are some Judaizers among them.
But Michael, can you assume that rather than the possibility that this was an accessible avenue for employment with
Oh,
reasonable
absolutely.
pay?
Oh, sure. No, very attractive. Yeah, and you get to wear your cool clothes. You can go to Walmart and you can buy your camo and your Nikes, and you get a uniform allowance.
So do you not think that among the people that are wearing the ICE uniform, that there's going to be equivalent remorse, very much like there was remorse among the military in Vietnam?
I think there will be. I think some will be remorseful, some will wear it as a badge of pride. I'm sure that there are going to be a lot of motorcycle gangs who sport ICE members who have that history and will remember these days where they were able to bully people and pick on people and shoot grenades at people. I told you about coming in at the airport, right? And it was a border protection guy, saw my yarmulke. After all the clearance that I had gone through with the retinal scans and the passport control stuff, immigration customs. I'm getting my luggage, I'm going out, and this guy, all dressed in a uniform, he's carrying not an M4, not a military rifle. He's carrying a grenade launcher, what they call a thumper, that shoots grenades and tear gas,
What
you
the hell is
know,
he doing with that? Doing
in
with that?
inside the airport, plus a K-bar,
Yeah,
the
right,
military knife, you
right.
could chop your way through, bone with that, and a sidearm. I don't know what it was, probably a Glock. These guys like to carry Glocks. They get, allowances, and they buy what they buy, and Glock is the fashionable, item. It's a 9 millimeter semi-automatic
It's a,
weapon
it's
of
a,
death, and, so he's heavily armed and carrying this heavy thumper in his arms, and he's questioning civilians after all that. This is not a obviously, this is not a wise use of federal resources, but
so
I
what?
I I
If
think
you're
it's designed to intimidate.
if you're carrying a grenade launcher, what is your target? A plane, a car, a vehicle?
Well, grenades or, CS, canisters. You He could've just as they're interchangeable. You
I
you
say.
can
So
and
you could gas everybody in the airport with this thing if you needed to.
everybody in that terminal, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it gave him quite a lot of, power, you know? Um, and I think I told you the last time, I think I recognized that guy's type. I've been a lawyer for decades and decades, and I run into some of these characters
Well,
who
most
do not
importantly,
make it as security guards. I remember one guy. This guy reminded me of this fellow who not only washed out as a security guard, but then they sent him over to be a gas station attendant, and he washed out of that because he was too cruel to the customers. So this guy looked like that. Different generation, but the same type of human being.
how
So,
often, Michael, are you targeted because you're wearing the garb of an Orthodox Jew?
well, I wear a yarmulke. Well, I'll tell you, yesterday I had this Arab guy spit on me. I was at the gym working out. I was sitting with a buddy by the pool and the hot tub. Looks
Yeah.
out at Woodward and the zoo. It's a nice spot to sit. And I'm talking with this guy. There are all these people in this hot tub that's getting a ring around it. It's kind of schmutzy, kind of dirty. But my buddy and I, there's a tall, bald, bearded black guy. My good friend Dave and I are sitting there and talking about all kinds of things, and this Arab guy comes out, and I'd encountered him before. He told me he'd advanced on me before and told me that, "You are a Jew," he told me. "Look, I know that's the thing on your head. I am an Arab. Israel killed my father," he says, and I was so proud of myself that I didn't say, "Good, I'm glad," or anything like that, or, "We can arrange for you to go too." I didn't. I was pretty nice, and in no time at all, he said something that had me loudly cursing him, and he was cursing me back. So that was a month or so ago. So yesterday, around 4:30, he comes out, and he's glaring at me. He's got shorts on, bare feet, carrying his cane, a big wood cane, and he's glaring at me, and normally I don't look at him, and I look back at him, and I'm shocked that he's looking daggers at me, and he goes past, and he turns just strategically, and he spits. So I got just a little spit on my arm. I don't think I even stood up, but I started cursing him, and he slithers out this big safety door, and then gesticulates from the other side. he's ready to take me on. He promised that he would attack me when I least expected it. He threatened that.
What are you gonna do about that?
It'll be okay.
You'll take care
What?
of yourself.
I can take care of myself. Well, I was laughing with Dave, like, "Dave, I don't he's threatened me." "Well, Mike, I think you can take care of this, and just take his cane," so
You need to get one of these Cop McCraw bumper stickers on your car to protect you.
what bumper sticker?
The Jewish martial arts, Cop McCraw.
Krav Maga? Yeah, yeah, that'd be okay. Well, I know a few things, so should be okay.
Okay.
Actually, this was assault, so, even a little fleck of spit amounts to assault, and I mentioned it to one of the, staff, so I I'm not I'd be surprised if they don't throw his ass out forever.
I think that would be a good idea for all concerned.
Yeah.
I think really to protect him because he would be shielded from the toxicity of you and the deadly yarmulke.
The yarmulke is to remind yourself and anyone looking at you that there is a power higher than you are, than I am. Men need that more than women. Women don't need that, but a man need to be reminded that there is a God and that there's a God above, and the yarmulke helps for that.
Let me flip the question a little bit since I have a number of Islamic people that I consider my friends. Have you had the converse where people will approach you and show you appropriate respect for the fact that you are a pious Jew?
Well,
Among
immediately after that, a fellow came up, "What was that about?" I said, and he had a Magen David around his neck,
Yep.
and, he goes, "I'm not Jewish, but I'm with you. I want you to know I encountered someone who had the tattoo, who had been, from the concentration camps, and I know what they went through, and, I want you to know this. I have your back." Um,
That's very sweet.
I You run into a lot of that. Well, sometimes it's nuts. I remember I was at, it was a gun, safety class, a gun concealed pistol license qualifying class, and a gentleman came up to me at a break, and he was saying, "I recognize that yarmulke. I want you to know, my father was in the meat business, and we met many, many Orthodox Jews, and let me just tell you, fuck them Arabs." So I went, "Oh, that's nice." I mean, there's another fellow at the gym who is a Persian. He's an Iranian, and, he worries about he's a big muscle man. He's quite a guy. Dan, I can't even begin to pronounce his name. He's a Farsi speaker, and
Uh-huh.
Farsi is this impossible language, but his English is real good, and he's quite a guy. He knows about this Arab guy, and I mentioned to him that the Arab fellow has part of a Quranic surah tattooed on his arm, and this guy from a Muslim country, Muslim world, just thinks that's hilarious because Islam forbids
Tattoos.
tattooing. This is honored more in the breach, I guess, than in the observance. He thinks this is funny, but he's going on about the situation of the Iranians and what do they want, and he's saying, well, one, I'm with you, and he's hoping that the Jews and even Trump, or Trump will come and rescue the Persians from the mullahs because they're sick and tired of government by, these horrible corrupt clergymen. But he's saying, "You know who they really hate? They hate the Arabs." And he laughs about that, because there's a great deal of hatred, and it's just free floating.
Well,
But
the
that's
Sunnis and the Shiites have yet to heal the rift.
I did immigration law, and I would have all these people from different ethnicities and religious denominations. And the one question they all asked me was, "Why are you representing that trash?" Every other group they regarded as trash. There was no sense of we're all the children of God, we're all made in the image. It was a sense of what the evangelicals say, God don't make no garbage, that God don't make no trash. There is this why every Middle Eastern group that you can think of we had a lot, Detroit is a real cosmopolitan city. Everybody comes. You can get always been able to get work here. But every group you could imagine was called trash by pretty much every other group. So I think to hate your neighbors is one of the baseline characteristics of mankind. That's why we have the Torah to try to lift us out of that pathology. But at any rate, the yarmulke comes in handy for all kinds of things.
As
Also,
a
it's very handy for missing events that you don't wanna go to because they're usually held on a Saturday, and you can't possibly go and disgrace the yarmulke if you go to it too. It has gotten me out of many football games and tailgating parties and things like that.
I was about to say, as a fellow Detroit native, that I think one of the more compelling elements that relates to many of our sports teams, Tigers, Lions, Wings, Pistons, is
Michigan football,
it
your alma
seems to
mater.
unify the tribes.
And I'm so glad to sit that out and not be involved in any of that. The time I've saved by not being involved in spectator sports has been like quarter of a lifetime maybe. Got some work done instead.
I love heroes.
It wasn't that much of a sacrifice, Tommy.
Okay, all right, I get it. You spent your time better doing other things. Well, thank you for your wisdom. What do you foresee the next few weeks?
I think we're probably going to do something with our armed forces in Iran. We can't send our Navy uh, out for their health. I think there's going to be some action.
Well, I hope that Copenhagen is safe.
Copenhagen? Yep, yeah. Let's hope we leave Denmark alone. Well, he said we'd leave Denmark alone. Yeah, I hope we leave the NATO countries alone. But it looks like Iran is on the dance on the dance list. Um, and I expect we're going to have some action there. Um, I was bucked up by I I don't know about your desire to talk politics, but there was uh, a midterm election that was held in Texas in a very strong and Trump country,
Uh-huh.
where he'd won the race in that district by 17 points, and the Democrat was elected in this bright red area, and it seemed to be American citizens sending a communication to the world. They don't want Republicans. They're sick of them. But I don't know. I keep running into people who look at you and I have looked at these videos of what appear plainly to be the murders of that Renee Good, may she rest in peace, and that wonderful nurse, Alexander Preddy, and they saw that, or they think they saw that, and they determined with Lindsey Graham and these other Republicans, the that, they had it coming. So, I don't know. I keep running into people who have a completely different idea of the facts. Their facts are not our facts. You wouldn't think that would be possible among people whom you like and respect, but there they are. There are all these people who believe Trump and his baloney, what Bill Barr, his attorney general, called bullshit about the stolen election, and they're with Trump on this. He never gives up. He never retracts. He never apologizes. He deflects. He delays, but there's never an acknowledgement that anything that he did was wrong. I don't know. I wish I had your knowledge of the syndrome of narcissism, if that's what's operating with him, and could identify what's how this works. I told you about we talked about this. Roy Cohen the horrible Roy Cohn takes his mentee, Trump, to see his old friend Richard Nixon, and they meet, and Nixon, two crooks, lying crooks, come together with young Trump. And there's a wonderful movie about this, The Apprentice, that I really thought was great, and the actor played Cohen just nailed him, I thought. The Trump character was vivid, but they met Nixon, and Nixon recognized in Trump special qualities. He wanted to run him. When politicians come upon a likely candidate, that's the praise, you know? I remember, somebody saying that about my Uncle Howard, may he rest in peace. "Let's run him." Well, Nixon wanted to run Trump right then and there. He was saying, "I don't know what it is, kid, but you've got it. You've got it. You could be anything." And Nixon knew what Nixon was no dummy. I think Trump is a dummy. I don't think Trump has much in the way of real mental capacity. You know, a teacher at Wharton was saying, if he remembered him at all, he remembered him as one of the dumbest students that he'd ever had,
I'm
and he probably
reminded of the wonderful book that Walter Isaacson wrote about Jobs, and he talks about Steve Jobs' compelling charisma and his ability to project the reality distortion field. And I see that in Trump, that he's, as opposed to Jobs, who I think was genuinely charismatic, with Trump, he projects it out there, and the loyal followers believe the reality distortion field.
well, I've seen in different politicians great charisma, terrific emotional intelligence. I was asking a friend of mine about his brother, his older brother, and I've known his older brother for a long, long time, and I was asking, "Dennis, what is it about George? You know, there's something about him that you run into him, and he says, 'Hi' to you, and the next thing you know, you feel like you wanna give him your power of attorney." And Dennis goes, "Mike, I don't know what it is. I've seen that all my life." And this guy was a minor politician. Now he's a flim-flam Protestant pastor. He's a preacher who lies about his age, you know? I mean, he resigned in disgrace finally, he did all that, but he had great gifts, and there was that wonderful charisma, that wonderful emotional intelligence that kinda confides in you and turns you into an ally whether you want it or not. So it's something that you run into with some people, and
I think
obviously
both Barack Obama and Bill Clinton had those gifts.
well, I remember Newt Gingrich was going on about Clinton, and he humiliated himself. Clinton had taken him along on Air Force One and Newt was talking about being there, and he's saying that the president Clinton is this enormously charming individual, and Newt was a professor of history. He knew history, and he's saying, I've read about FDR, about Franklin Roosevelt, and Clinton has what I think the same qualities, the most charming guy. Maureen Dowd in the New York Times was going on about Newt, the wretched Newt, mewling like a schoolgirl with a crush over over the charm of Clinton, and he held up the whole government, to he shut down the government, Newt did, as Speaker, uh, of the House.
Well, apparently Clinton had that effect on a number of schoolgirls.
There, but for the grace of God, got way well, I remember a friend of mine he was a really tall guy, a teacher in the Arkansas Public Schools in Clinton, and then the governor of Arkansas came, and they were at some parties together, and he and his wife were talking about Clinton, they were about the same height, they're both about 6'8" or so, very tall people, but he was saying he was just the most charming guy, you'd follow him anywhere, and sometimes God makes people like that, you don't know how it comes about. I don't understand Trump's charm, but I've never been in his midst either.
Well, I think Clinton was fundamentally different than that. Having, if we could just encapsulate his unfortunate affair with Monica, I think he was one hell of a president. Did a good job.
Well, I think both he and Barack Obama were normally, whatever room they were normally the smartest man in the room. You can't say that about Trump. I remember Justin Trudeau, who was one of those too. Normally, the smartest man in the room was at, a leadership conference, and he was going on about what a dummy. He was caught on tape going on about what a dummy Trump is. Ignorant and self-indulgent and dumb, uneducated and, you know, but charismatic, obviously.
Well, so you haven't seen Melania yet, the movie.
We joked about that. The airlines won't play it on a flight because they're afraid people will walk out. I don't
Okay.
know. We may end up seeing it, Tommy. Maybe we'll love it. Something about a Slovenian model with no depth at all.
Well, whatever time you invest in it, it's the
Well,
time that you're
it's
not
like
living.
sports, I mean, maybe I have a new newsletter that needs to come out, and I wanted to write about my old partner, who's a former Baptist pastor, he came to Torah. He decided that, the way of the God of Christianity was a dead end and wanted to know the God of Israel and learn Torah, and he was my partner. He was just a wonderful guy. And he helped me write the book, Rainbow Covenant. Um, he was a sounding board and a source um, and, um, um, and he heard from a military man of some exalted grade, I think, who had gotten a hold of Rainbow Covenant and was talking to Jack, the other face of our foundation, and he was saying he read it, and he called out to his wife, "Honey, have you ever thought about converting?" And she responded, "Converting to what?" "To Judaism." And she responded, "No." And I wanted to bring that up because you don't have to convert to Judaism to get with the God of Israel or to be a good person. This is not some man-made religion where you have to accept the rites and rituals of a different religion. You just need to be a good person. Part of being a good person, though, is in this world, is to bless Israel. It's not like this guy who was spitting at me to curse Israel. Blessing Israel is not that simple a thing. It's not that guy who tells me, fuck them Arabs. That's not blessing Israel at all. It's to get with the program. And the program is something that it's designed to bring us all up into the next stage of human history, into possibly the stage where we are able to travel to the stars. I
I
think we're making a lot of progress if we can manage to survive somehow. We can't lose the human planet, and we've got to part of blessing Israel is to bless the planet too.
I'm with you there, brother. Michael, once again, I very much appreciate your perspective, your wisdom, and of course your humor. Uh, and look forward to talking to you again next week. What does a week hold for you?
Work,
Work? You gonna
work,
get out?
work and cold. We got the polar vortex here.
Yeah, you gonna get out of the cold at all?
I'm thinking of going down to Belize and climb a pyramid or two. We'll
Really?
see.
When are you gonna do that?
I don't know. I haven't set it up. I noticed a friend was down in Belize. I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
Central America isn't really that far away.
No, it's not. Okay. Thank you, buddy.
Okay.